A 6-year-old girl was shouted at and driven out of the house by her stepfather. Her suitcase burst open, clothes scattered all over the yard. Her dress was stained with dirt, and her little face was blurred with tears. She knelt down, sobbing desperately, begging to be allowed to stay. But no one helped the child until a millionaire walked up, extended his hand, and said a single sentence that left everyone in shock. "From now on, you are coming with me." Before we begin, please leave a comment about this story and give it a rating from 1 to 10. I wish you a few relaxing moments while listening to this story. And now, let us begin. The heavy wooden door swung open, echoing through the hallway of the house. A week had passed since the funeral, but the wooden home had not known a single day of peace. Emily Carter, 6 years old, stood clutching a small suitcase against her chest, her eyes filled with confusion. She had once been the center of this house, once lulled to sleep by her mother's songs, once carried in her stepfather's arms as he read bedtime stories. Now, that warmth lived only in memory. David Carter, 40, a man who had once been gentle and calm, now slumped unsteadily in a leather chair. His striped green and yellow shirt was wrinkled, his hand gripping a half-finished glass of liquor. The alcohol had reddened his eyes, his voice rough and unsteady. He roared, his voice rattling through the living room. "You are not my child. You are nothing but a burden. Get out right now." Emily flinched, her small hands trembling as she gripped the handle of the suitcase. She tried to step toward the stairs, but a sudden shove from behind knocked her down onto the steps. The suitcase burst open, clothes scattering everywhere. Her old teddy bear, a birthday gift from her mother, rolled across the cold tile floor. The woman standing nearby, Vanessa Blake, 30, the cousin of Emily's late mother, quickly walked toward David. Her tight red dress and golden curls gleamed under the light, her lips painted in a sharp red smile. She gently touched David's arm, her voice pretending to soothe. "David, stop it, the poor child. You've had too much to drink." But when she turned to Emily, her eyes flashed with a mocking smile that disappeared just as quickly behind a mask of pity. Emily saw it all, but she dared not speak. Outside in the yard, a few neighbors stood hidden behind the fence. They sighed, whispered among themselves, yet none dared to step in. The door of this house had long been shut against any interference. Emily struggled to her feet, picked up the teddy bear, and pressed it tightly to her chest. Her eyes shimmered, tears streaming down her cheeks. She whispered, almost as if speaking only to herself, "Daddy, you once promised you would never leave me." David staggered down the steps, his face darkening. "Stop pretending. Go. I told you already." Emily knelt upright, her voice breaking but clear. "I'll be good. I won't make noise. I can sleep on the sofa if you want. Just please don't send me outside." "Don't call me Dad," David snapped. "Your mother is gone. It's over. I won't carry any more burdens." "I'm not a burden." Emily shook her head repeatedly, clutching her teddy bear so tightly her hands turned pale. "I can make porridge the way Mom taught me. I'll study hard. Please don't drink anymore. It scares me." "Shut up," David roared, pointing a finger straight at her face. "You're exactly like your mother, always dragging me back to the past." "The past is our family," Emily sobbed. "You used to carry me on your back to the park, don't you remember?" Vanessa leaned in, her voice smooth, dripping like oil on fire. "David, that's enough. Let her learn to walk away on her own." She whispered close, a fleeting, triumphant smile on her lips. "Daddy, please." Emily pressed her hands together, her knees bleeding from collapsing onto the tiled floor. "You're all I have left. Get out." David gritted his teeth, shoving the suitcase out into the yard. Clothes spilled everywhere, even her wrinkled nightgown. "Don't make me say it again." Just then, firm footsteps echoed at the entrance. A tall man in a cream-colored suit stepped through the gate, carrying a black leather bag. His hair was neatly combed, his face stern, yet his eyes shone with determination and compassion. It was Jonathan Reed, 35 years old, a leading attorney in New York and the founder of Reed & Partners. He had represented major corporations and held wealth the press often praised, but he had never boasted. Today he was not here for business. He had come because of a promise he once made to Sarah, an old friend now gone, to visit her daughter often. But the scene before him froze him in place. The little girl slumped on the steps, clothes scattered, teddy bear fallen to the side, while David swayed unsteadily, and the woman at his shoulder smiled with victory. Without a word, Jonathan stepped forward, picked up the teddy bear, and placed it gently into Emily's hands. His voice was calm yet resolute. "Enough, David. This is how you treat the child?" David stiffened for a moment, then growled, "Jonathan, who do you think you are to interfere? This is my house, my family. Get out, right now." Jonathan straightened, his gaze locked firmly on David's. "Your house matter is throwing a motherless child into the street. That child is the daughter of the woman who once loved you with her whole life, David." Emily clutched her teddy bear and looked up. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but deep inside a faint light flickered, the first since her mother's death. Jonathan turned, holding out his hand toward her. He spoke slowly, each word carved into the heavy air like a vow. "From now on, you're coming with me." Emily hesitated. She glanced at David, hoping he might stop her from leaving. But David averted his eyes and turned back inside. Vanessa smiled, triumphant. At last, Emily's small, trembling hand touched Jonathan's. Behind her, the door slammed shut with a heavy echo, sealing the end of her past life. And that was also the moment that marked a new journey, one where a child would find family again, and a man would rescue the fate of a little girl. Jonathan bent down, picked up the suitcase that had burst open, and quickly tucked Emily's small belongings inside. He brushed the dust off the teddy bear with his sleeve, then placed it back into the child's arms. Without another word, he gently helped Emily to her feet. Her small hand clutched his wrist as if afraid she might slip away. "Let's go, sweetheart," Jonathan said softly. He opened the door of the Bentley, fastened the seatbelt, and adjusted the seat to fit the frame of a 6-year-old. Emily hugged the teddy bear tightly against her chest, her eyes red, unable to lift her face. Jonathan's cream-colored vest was stained when he leaned too far down, but he didn't notice. He turned on the heater, checked the seatbelt once more, then closed the door. Across the porch, the front door of the house stayed firmly shut. Next door, Mrs. Linda Green, the elderly neighbor, pulled back the curtain just enough to watch. She opened her window and called out into the empty street. The little girl didn't do anything wrong. Her voice trembled, but it carried a firm conviction. Jonathan looked up and nodded to her in gratitude. He would remember that face. It mattered now, because the truth needed witnesses. Jonathan walked around to the driver's seat and started the engine. Inside the car, the air felt heavy, as though every sound had been swallowed. Emily sat motionless, squeezing the teddy bear so tightly that her fingernails pressed into the fabric. Speaking slowly, lowering his voice so as not to startle her, Jonathan said, "I'm Jonathan. Your name is Emily, isn't it? I think I heard your mother talk about you." Emily pressed her lips together, her voice barely a whisper. "My name is Emily." Jonathan gave a faint, sorrowful smile. "Your mother was the best friend I ever had. I promise I won't let you be alone." Emily shifted slightly, still keeping her head down. "Mom used to talk about Uncle Jonathan," she murmured. She said, "You were the only one who always helped her." He drew a deep breath, steadying his voice. "Thank you for telling me that. From now on, things will be different. You're safe now." Emily hugged the teddy bear closer. After a long pause, she whispered, "Can I stay with you? At least for tonight." "Of course," Jonathan replied immediately. "My house is in Manhattan. There's a guest room. I'll call ahead so the housekeeper can prepare warm blankets for you." Jonathan's phone buzzed softly. The screen showed the name Anna Roberts, his private assistant at the law office. He silenced the call, not wanting to break the fragile quiet that had just settled over the child. He typed a short message instead. "Do not call right now. I'm handling something important. I'll reach out later." At his firm, everyone was used to him choosing people over work, especially when a child was involved. The car pulled away from the quiet neighborhood of Scarsdale. Jonathan turned up the heat a little. He reached for a small bottle of water from the console and handed it over. "Take a sip." Emily accepted the bottle with both hands. She drank in tiny sips, careful not to spill, as if one mistake would mean everything could be taken away. Jonathan watched her in the mirror, weighing how to begin. "When I was about your age," he said, "I had to leave a place that was supposed to be home. I grew up in an orphanage. There were days I felt invisible, like no one ever saw me. But your mom did. And there was a friend, too, someone who pulled me through the darkest part." Emily slowly turned her face toward him. For the first time since getting into the car, she looked at him. Her eyes were still swollen, but the panic in them had softened. Did Mom talk to you often?" "Yes," Jonathan answered. "We talked about how much you love drawing, how you enjoy vanilla ice cream at Central Park, and how you always sleep hugging your teddy bear. She was proud of you." Emily swallowed hard. She set the bottle down and hugged the teddy bear again. "After the funeral, Dad David wouldn't look at me anymore. Aunt Vanessa said I messed everything up. She said once Dad signed all the papers, I wouldn't be there anymore. I tried really hard to be good." Her voice faltered, then she added softly, almost as if afraid of waking something hidden, "I miss Mom so much. Every night she read me a story. Sometimes it was Charlotte's Web. Sometimes it was Good Night, Moon. After reading, she sang me to sleep. She always sang, 'You are my sunshine.' When she sang, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Now at night I can't turn the light off." Jonathan felt his chest tighten, but he kept his tone steady. He left the silence long enough for her words to rest in the air without interruption. In his mind, the image of the hospital room returned, the sharp smell of disinfectant, Sarah's face thinned by cancer, and her final call when she said, "If anything happens, please watch over her for me." And now her daughter was sitting beside him, clutching a worn teddy bear, confessing that she no longer dared to sleep in the dark. He could not fathom how adults could treat a child this way. "No child should ever have to prove they deserve to be in a home," Jonathan said slowly. "You are not at fault. Adults grieve in complicated ways, and sometimes they let others lead them astray. But that doesn't make you a mistake. Here, you are safe." Emily didn't respond right away. After a while, she slid one small finger into the sleeve of Jonathan's suit jacket, just brushing it lightly, as if testing whether the solidity was real. Jonathan stayed still, treating the gesture as an answer. He signaled and merged into the lane. His voice softened. "Tonight you just rest. Tomorrow we'll talk with a few good people. There's a detective named Maria. She's very skilled. And if you agree, during the day I'll take you to see a child psychologist, just to make sure you're sleeping well, eating well, not because anything is wrong with you." Emily gave a small nod. She hadn't opened her heart fully yet, but she no longer curled in on herself the way she had on the porch. On her lap, the teddy bear was smoothed out more carefully. The car moved closer toward the city. The road was long, but the silence inside was different now. It felt like a resting place, not a bottomless pit. Jonathan glanced at the mirror and saw her eyes, still red, but fixed on him as though he were her anchor. "Emily," he said, "I will not abandon you." The girl lifted her face, her lips trembling slightly. Her voice was so soft it was almost a breath. Did my mom ever tell you that if one day I was alone, who I should trust?" Jonathan did not answer Emily's question right away. He switched on the signal and moved into the slower lane, placing his warm hand gently over her small one as a quiet assurance. "Let's go home first," he said, "then I'll tell you." The car stopped in front of a building in Manhattan. The doorman, Mr. Harris, opened the car door and bowed. His eyes softened with sympathy when he saw the little girl clutching a teddy bear, but he maintained the professional composure of someone in service. "Good evening, Mr. Reed." Jonathan nodded and spoke softly. "Would you please carry the suitcase?" Mr. Harris simply replied, "Yes, sir," and followed them in silence. In the elevator, Emily stood close to Jonathan. She gripped the teddy bear's strap as if it were her lifeline. Jonathan pressed the floor button and watched the numbers light up one by one. He lowered his voice. "Your mother once spoke of me. She said that if something bad ever happened, you could trust me." Emily tilted her head up slightly, then quickly looked down again as if afraid of hoping too much. The doors opened. Miss Parker, the middle-aged housekeeper, was waiting. She lived by the tidy principles of American orderliness, straightforward yet discreet. "I warmed the chicken soup. There's toasted bread and warm milk." She looked at Emily and gave only a gentle smile, asking no further questions. Jonathan thanked her and added, "I'll take care of the child tonight. Please rest early." The dining room was lit, just enough. Jonathan pulled out a chair for Emily. He placed a bowl of soup and a small glass of milk in front of her. Steam rose gently, but Emily did not touch the spoon. She sat still, eyes fixed on the table, smoothing the hem of her teddy bear's dress flat with her hand. Jonathan sat across from her, not pressing. He set down his own spoon, then began to speak. When I was your age, I had no one either. I grew up in an orphanage. Other kids made fun of me for my cheap shoes, for my old coat. People said I would never amount to anything. Emily looked up a little, as if she wanted to hear more. Back then, your mother's house was right across from the orphanage, Jonathan continued slowly. She often came over to play with the children, bringing cookies, used books, and sometimes a few good coats. She remembered each of our names, asked what we studied that day, what we wanted to read tomorrow. To me, she did many small things that turned out to be great, showing me the way to the library, paying a test fee I couldn't afford, giving me a coat that actually fit, and most importantly, giving me faith when everyone else shook their heads. Your mother was the one who helped me stand firm and find the determination to get through, so that one day I could be where I am now. Emily lifted the spoon, stirred the soup once, then set it down again. She pressed her lips tightly for a long moment, then burst into tears as though she had held them back for far too many days. I just want Dad David to hug me one more time, like before Mom died. Back then, he lifted me up high, bought me vanilla ice cream, read me stories. Now he looks right past me, like he's looking through a wall. Jonathan slid a tissue closer to her. He did not rush to offer empty comfort. He let her cry, because tears are also the body's way of saving itself. You have the right to remember, he said after a steady breath. But you also have the right to be loved again. No one can steal your memories, and the future is still waiting for you. Emily wiped her eyes and pulled the glass of milk closer. She drank one sip, then another. The soup was still warm, and she took spoonfuls, small and slow. It was not out of appetite, but at least she no longer starved herself. Jonathan stood and went into the kitchen, returning with a small box. He placed it in front of her, opening it to reveal a scratched metal keychain shaped like a star. When I left the orphanage, this was all I had. Your mother gave it to me and said, "When you're afraid, hold on to this. It will remind you that someone believes in you. Now I'm giving it to you. When you're scared, hold it tight, and remember I am here." Emily touched the star lightly with her fingertip, then pulled her hand back. She looked up at Jonathan, her eyes less guarded, though still cautious. If Dad, David, wants to see me, then what? Jonathan kept his voice low and steady. First of all, you need to be safe. The rest is for the adults to do their part, take responsibility, and make things right. When you're ready, then we'll talk about meeting. The meal ended slowly. Miss Parker carried the tray away softly. Jonathan led Emily through the living room into a small guest room. The bed was already made with clean sheets, and a night lamp shaped like a moon sat on the bedside table. He checked the window, pulled the curtains, then opened the closet and took out a light sweater. "If you get cold, put this on." Emily placed her teddy bear on the pillow and stared at the night lamp for a long while. She turned back, hesitant. "Uncle, was my mom ever afraid?" "Yes," Jonathan replied. "She was afraid she wouldn't live long enough to see you grow up, but she chose to believe. She believed that good people would find you, and that you would find good people." The little girl nodded and climbed into bed. Jonathan stepped back so she could feel her own space. He dimmed the lights, leaving only a gentle glow. Before closing the door, he spoke through the small gap. "If you need me, just call. Anytime." The door closed softly, but the hallway light stayed on. Jonathan went back to his small study and opened his wallet. A faded photograph appeared. A woman smiling as she leaned against his shoulder, her eyes shining like the first light of summer. He placed the photo on the desk, beside an unopened file. The phone lit up. A message from Anna Roberts read, "Do you need me to set up a meeting with Detective Maria, and the child psychologist, Dr. Leah Simmons, has an opening tomorrow morning?" Jonathan typed back, "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., and contact attorney Michael Turner in the afternoon." "Thank you, Anna." He sat quietly, listening for the sound of small footsteps in the living room. Nothing. only the steady breathing of a child who had finally fallen into deep sleep. Jonathan held the photograph, closed his eyes for a moment, as if speaking to the friend he had lost. "I will keep my promise." That night, when Jonathan turned off the living room light and sat watching over Emily as she slept, in another corner of the city, the sharp clink of a glass against the wooden counter broke the silence. David Carter leaned his elbow on the bar. The scent of alcohol mixed with the stale trace of cigarette smoke. Mark Sullivan, his longtime drinking companion, sat beside him, swirling the ice in his glass out of habit. A 45-year-old man, reckless with his words, Mark enjoyed pushing others into doing things they would later regret. "Drink up, David," Mark chuckled. "It'll clear your head." David drained his glass. His eyelids felt heavy. His voice came out hoarse. "She's a burden. When I look at her, all I see are things that will never come back." Mark signaled the bartender for another round. "Keep it simple. Once the paperwork is done, you'll finally have peace. Without your signature, we wouldn't even be sitting here tonight." The bar door swung open. Vanessa Blake walked in, wearing a red dress, her blonde curls catching the light. She walked straight toward David, laid her slender hand on his shoulder, and spoke in a soothing tone. "You're exhausted, and it's only natural. The girl looks too much like her mother, always reminding you of the past. You need rest." David turned his face away, but he didn't pull his shoulder from Vanessa's touch. He called for another drink. Vanessa let out a quiet sigh, then slid into the space between David and Mark, claiming it as her own. At the far end of the bar, a young woman rose from her seat, pretending to make a phone call. No one paid attention. She wore a baseball cap, a dark jacket, and her eyes missed nothing. It was Detective Maria Santos, a homicide detective, whose habit was to sit motionless like a shadow until the exact moment arrived to catch what mattered. Vanessa's glance shifted toward the door. Carla White appeared. She looked about 28, with heavy makeup and a thick envelope clutched in her hand. Carla drifted past the counter like a gust of wind, slipped the envelope into Vanessa's handbag with practiced ease, and leaned close to whisper, "It's all there. The power of attorney for managing the trust fund, some transfer orders, and the draft agreement. It just needs his signature." Vanessa gave a faint nod, never looking at Carla again. She turned back, pressed her body closer against David, her voice dripping like honey. "You only need to sign. I'll take care of the rest. I promise everything will be cleaned up, the accounts, the house. No one will trouble you anymore." David narrowed his eyes. He pulled out his wallet. His fingers stopped at the slot holding an old photograph. 3 people in the glow of an afternoon sun. His younger self, the woman he had lost, and Emily as a tiny child. A rush of silence pierced his chest like cold wind. His hand trembled slightly. "No," David muttered. "Not tonight. Not yet." Mark sneered, jabbing his elbow into David's side. "How long do you want to be haunted? Sign it and finally sleep like a man at peace." Vanessa placed the envelope on the counter and opened it slightly. The papers glinted under the bar light. Her voice was soft as wool. "Just a formality, David. I am not taking anything from you. I am helping you find peace." David looked at the top page. The bold letters about temporary authorization blurred through the haze of alcohol. He swallowed hard. The photo sticking out from his wallet still showed a corner of an old embrace of 3 people, looking back at him without a word. His breath grew heavier. He slammed the bottom of his glass against the counter with a sharp crack, as if he wanted to drown his memories at the bottom of the glass. "Bring me a pen." Mark chuckled and signaled the waiter to fetch one. Vanessa pulled the papers closer and set the pen right where he needed to sign. She leaned in, her voice brushing his ear. "Right here, David." At the back table, Maria quietly lifted her phone. She zoomed in as Carla pointed at the line of text, as Vanessa pushed the envelope forward, as Mark blocked the view from behind. The faint click of the camera melted into the background music. David placed the pen on the paper. His wrist froze. The photo in his wallet remained open. The little girl in the picture was smiling, a smile from many years ago before the sky collapsed. David blinked, the vein in his temple pulsing furiously. "David," Vanessa urged, impatience sharpening her voice. "Sign it." He drew in a long breath and pulled a mouthful of liquor, as if dragging courage into himself. The pen scratched a shaky line. Ink seeped into the paper. Maria took another shot. Her camera captured the man's trembling hand, the thick envelope, and the sharp glance Vanessa shot at Carla like a knife. Mark lifted his glass high. "That's the David I know." Vanessa closed the envelope, slid it back into her bag, and let a thin smile curve across her lips like a red thread. "It's done. Starting tomorrow, things will be a lot quieter." David pressed his hand against his face. He did not look at anyone. In his wallet, the old photo slipped deeper into the leather slot, hidden from sight. At the back table, Maria lowered her phone. She rose and walked past without looking at them, leaving only a tip for the waiter. Her steps were steady and light. By the time the door closed behind her, she already had what she came for. The moment when 3 names appeared together in one frame: David, Vanessa, Carla, and a signature still wet with ink. When the bar door closed behind Vanessa, Detective Maria Santos already had enough photos. At dawn, Jonathan received a short email. "There is evidence. Keep the girls safe. I will be in touch." He looked at Emily sleeping, nodded to himself, then typed a message to someone else. Late that morning, Jonathan brought Emily to the home of Mrs. Linda Green. Across the street, a white funeral wreath still hung from the day of the service. Linda opened the door quickly, and the moment she saw Emily, she threw her arms around her, her voice breaking. "My dear, I knocked on the door. I spoke to them, but..." She stopped, swallowed hard. Her old hands trembled, as if even touching Emily might cause her pain. Emily stood quietly in that embrace, her teddy bear pressed between them. She didn't cry, only rested her head on Linda's shoulder, as if searching for a familiar scent. Mr. Henry, Linda's husband, stayed a step behind, placing a pitcher of water and a few cookies on the table. He was a man of few words, but his eyes were steady and warm. They sat around the small dining table. Jonathan opened his notebook and asked permission to record. Linda took a deep breath, speaking slowly so her voice would not falter. "I saw the girl kneeling, begging him not to do it. But he..." She turned her face, wiping her eyes. "He still pushed her away. And that woman Vanessa said, 'Let him be,' then shut the door." Emily dragged a chair carefully, sitting near the window. She took a pencil from her pocket and a blank sheet of paper. Without being told, she began to draw. A house, 3 figures. The mother in the middle, Emily on the left. The man on the right turned his back. The pencil strokes were uneven, but very clear. Jonathan looked at the drawing, his throat tightening. He adjusted the microphone, lowered his voice. "Would you like to tell me more?" "Only if you want to." Emily kept her eyes on the paper. "I heard Aunt Vanessa say," she whispered, "that when Dad signs all the papers, I won't be there anymore." The pencil pressed harder on the picture of the door. She shaded it carefully, as if everything poured into that one hinge. Linda gripped Jonathan's hand, squeezing lightly. "Do something. The girl can't take anymore." Jonathan nodded and took out his phone, calling attorney Michael Turner. Turner, almost 40, was a close colleague of Jonathan's, and known for his persistence in family litigation. His voice was firm and steady. "Send me everything. Videos, photos, witness statements. I'll request a temporary protective order for her, and I'll file for an emergency hearing." Jonathan forwarded Maria's email, along with a summary of Linda's testimony. Turner texted back immediately. "A neighbor witnesses gold. Meet me at the office at 2 o'clock. Bring the girl if she wants, but make sure she rests first." Jonathan put the phone away and turned to Emily. He sat down at her eye level. "I'll go with you. No one has the right to erase you from your own home." Emily looked up. Her eyes were misted with a thin layer of fog, but no longer clouded. "What if Dad doesn't want me anymore?" Jonathan rested his hand on the back of her chair, careful not to touch her so she wouldn't flinch. "Then we let the law answer that. And even so, there are still people who want you. I am one of them." Linda brought over a small cup of cocoa. She set it in front of Emily and then pushed the drawing to the middle of the table. "Sign your name, Emily, so later we'll know this is your voice." Emily wrote her name in block letters, carefully shaping each stroke. Next to it, she drew a small star. Jonathan took a picture of the drawing, asking permission to keep the original. Linda nodded, holding the girl's hand a little longer, as if giving her strength. Before leaving, Henry handed Jonathan a folded sheet of paper. I wrote down the times from yesterday. I saw the car parked. I heard Mr. David yelling. If needed, I will speak. Thank you, Jonathan said, gripping his hand. We will call on you. Out in the yard, a gentle breeze stirred the rose bushes. Emily walked slowly, clutching her stuffed animal against her chest. Jonathan opened the car door, leaned down, and buckled her seatbelt. He paused for a second, asking softly, "Is there something you'd like to eat today? Anything at all?" "Butter toast," Emily replied. "And, if possible, vanilla ice cream. But I'll only eat a little." Jonathan smiled. "All right, we'll make the toast. The ice cream will be for later, after we meet a friend of mine." On the way back to Manhattan, the phone vibrated. Turner called on video, his face clear on the screen. "I've scheduled the filing. Detective Maria will send me the original file. Jonathan, we need a child psychologist to do a preliminary assessment, not to label the girl, but to prove she is being harmed." "Already arranged," Jonathan answered. "And I want to request a temporary restraining order against Vanessa." "There's basis for it," Turner said firmly. "We'll do it immediately." The call ended. Jonathan glanced in the mirror. Emily was watching the scenery recede outside the window. She turned and spoke in a small voice, as if laying the first stone of a new foundation. "I trust you, but I still miss my dad." "You can miss him and still be protected," Jonathan replied. "Those two things don't conflict." That evening, the law office lights burned bright. Turner spread the files across the table, piecing them together into a clear picture. A message from Maria read, "The photos are on the server." There's a short audio clip. Linda sent the sworn statement. Henry confirmed the timeline. Emily's drawing lay in the center, like a simple map only an honest heart could fully understand. Jonathan stood tall, looking at Turner. His voice was deep and steady, without hesitation. "We're taking this to court." Right after Turner closed the file, Jonathan picked up his coat and held Emily's hand as he stood. "Let's go," he said softly. "We're going to court." Emily nodded, clutching her teddy bear. Her small steps stayed right beside his, not straying half a step. The hallway of the Manhattan family court was brightly lit. Turner walked ahead to clear the way, carrying a thick case file under his arm. Detective Maria Santos was already waiting. She quickly handed over a USB drive and gave Jonathan a firm nod. "The original is in here," Maria said. "I'll step in as a witness if needed." Jonathan replied, "Thank you," then bent down to straighten Emily's collar. He whispered, "All you need to do is tell the truth. No one can take your voice away." The courtroom doors opened. Judge Patricia Coleman, 50 years old, steady and composed, sat in the presiding chair. She gave a brief introduction, emphasizing the child's safety throughout the hearing. Her voice was neither cold nor gentle, but it made the entire room fall silent. On the plaintiff's side stood Jonathan and attorney Michael Turner. Across the aisle, Vanessa Blake entered as if walking a red carpet, her fitted dress drawing every eye. Beside her was Peter Dawson, 40, a sharp lawyer known for his fierce attacks. David Carter followed, his collar rumpled, eyes sunken and weary. Vanessa leaned in and whispered, her lips brushing his ear like a dry blade. "You have to prove the girl isn't normal, otherwise we lose everything." David's shoulders jerked slightly, but he gave no reply. The judge confirmed the identities of both parties. Turner rose and stated briefly, "Your Honor, we are requesting a temporary protective order for Emily, and we are submitting evidence of expulsion and asset manipulation." Jonathan handed Maria's USB to the court clerk. Linda and Henry sat in the back row, holding hands, their eyes restless but resolute. Dawson lifted a stack of papers, his tone flat as if rehearsed. The defense submits a psychological evaluation of the child. The document indicates Emily exhibits instability, fabricates stories, and cannot remain in a triggering environment. He placed a photocopy on the table, sliding it toward the clerk. Vanessa raised her chin, looking at Jonathan with an air of triumph. Turner arched a brow. "Your Honor, may we know the basis and the individual who conducted this evaluation?" Dawson's lips curled. "A family counseling specialist, for privacy reasons. We request to withhold the name at this stage." Judge Coleman tapped her gavel lightly. "Without identification and professional verification, this document will not be considered evidence. However, the court notes the defense will have to prove its validity if they intend to continue relying on it." Jonathan leaned toward Turner, speaking in a near whisper. "Keep pace. Don't let them drag us into the mud." Turner nodded, then requested permission to call the neighbor as a witness. Linda stepped forward. She spoke evenly, in short fragments, her voice breaking at certain points. "I saw the little girl kneeling. I begged him not to do it, but the door still closed." David lowered his head, his hand clenching tightly. It was Emily's turn. Jonathan lifted the little girl onto the stand, keeping his hand steady on her arm until she stood firmly. He leaned down and whispered, "Just say what you remember. You don't need to say much. Only the truth." Emily nodded, her eyes drifting to the loose stitch on the edge of her teddy bear. Her small hand reached for Jonathan's and held on tightly. Dawson straightened his tie, trying to impose authority. "Emily, do you know that lying is wrong?" Emily blinked, her voice small. "I know. Have you ever made up a story just so Mr. Jonathan would give you gifts?" Jonathan shot up to his feet. Objection. Leading and insulting. Judge Coleman responded. Sustained. Attorney Dawson, stick to the facts. Turner stepped forward, blocking half of Dawson's view. His voice was calm. "Emily, can you tell the court why you were afraid to go home that day?" Emily swallowed hard. "Because," Aunt Vanessa said when Dad finished signing the papers, "I wouldn't be there anymore." The entire courtroom fell silent. Dawson pressed his lips together, then raised his hand to request access to the report. He spoke rapidly. "As the court can see, the child is traumatized. This is a sign of instability." Turner immediately countered. "Being forced out of her home is not trauma, it is a real experience." Jonathan laid another folder on the table. Emails, photos, statements, along with Detective Santos's recording of the property deal last night. Vanessa stiffened for a moment, then leaned her shoulder against David. She whispered into his ear, her voice sweet to the point of chilling, "All you have to do is say the girl made it up. Just one sentence." David stared down at his shoes, his fingers tugging at the hem of his shirt as if searching for something to hold on to. In his eyes lingered a blur of fear and regret. The alcohol had not fully worn off, but it could not muffle the pounding of memory. Judge Coleman scanned the list of evidence. She looked up. "The court will temporarily admit the testimony of the neighbor as credible and accept Exhibit 5, a USB containing images. The psychological report is unverified and cannot yet be used as conclusive evidence." The gavel struck once, sharp and firm. Emily stood still for a long time. She wanted to cry but fought to stay composed. Her lips trembled as if pressing against a grain of salt. Jonathan squeezed her hand, lending her the rhythm of steady breath. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm right here." The girl drew in a deep breath and lifted her face. Her eyes moved past Dawson, past Vanessa, and stopped at David. There was no accusation, only a yearning knocking at the door of memory. "Dad," Emily's voice broke, "do you remember the time we ate ice cream together at Central Park?" Emily's question fell into the courtroom like a pebble striking the surface of a still pond. David lifted his head by instinct, then froze. He swallowed hard, his throat as dry as paper. No one said another word. Only the soft scratch of the court clerk's pen moving across paper remained. Emily tightened her grip on the teddy bear. She drew in a breath, held it for a beat, then released it slowly. That day was Sunday. Mom was sitting on the couch reading a book. Dad carried me on his back toward the door and said, "Let's go find some sunshine." We went to Central Park. Dad bought me 2 vanilla scoops. One melted into my hand, and he laughed before licking it clean. I told him it was gross, and he laughed even harder. Then we went to the lake, and Dad folded a paper boat from a receipt and set it afloat. He said if the wind was good, the boat would reach the very spot where Mom was standing. That day, the wind was perfect. Her voice was steady and clear. Each sentence felt like she was laying down another brick on the foundation of an old house. Jonathan stood beside the podium, quietly matching his breaths with Emily's. Turner stared down at his notebook, his pen held tight in his hand but unmoving. David wavered in his seat. Images surged back at him like a tide. The blue-covered book in his wife's hands, the faint scent of vanilla ice cream, the crumpled receipt in his pocket, the sticky sweetness in his daughter's small palm. Little things, yet heavy as an entire lifetime. Emily turned fully toward him. "You used to be the best dad. Why don't you even recognize me anymore?" David could no longer brace himself against the chair. He slumped, one hand covering half his face. The scent of alcohol still lingered, but his vision grew clearer through the blur. I was wrong," he whispered, broken like someone relearning how to speak. "Maria, I let Vanessa mislead me. I abandoned my little girl." Detective Maria Santos tilted her head slightly but didn't interrupt. She only marked another time note in her notebook. On the back row, Linda gently touched Henry's hand. Neither of them spoke. The entire courtroom seemed to be holding its breath. Vanessa shot to her feet, her voice sharp as glass. "Don't listen to her. She's making it up. Children misremember things all the time. David, tell them." David didn't look at her. He lowered his hand from his face, revealing bloodshot eyes. "There are things you can't make up," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Peter Dawson immediately jumped in. "Your Honor, the defense objects to turning this courtroom into a stage for emotional theatrics. We request that proceedings remain focused on professional documentation." Jonathan straightened, cutting through with a tone not loud but firm. "A child cannot invent longing." Judge Coleman raised her hand. Silence. She looked from Emily to David, then turned to Dawson. "This courtroom is not the place for personal attacks. Counselor, return to fact-based questioning." Vanessa gripped the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "If the court allows a child to control everything, then we have no law at all." Turner turned toward her, his voice calm, as if tying a bow. "Law begins with the truth, and the truth has just spoken in the voice of a child." Emily froze at those words. She blinked rapidly, her tears rising and spilling over. She did not sob loudly. They were just quiet drops rolling down, soaking into her collar, leaving a salty trace. Jonathan pulled out his handkerchief and held it out. Emily's small hand was still resting in his, slowly warming. David looked at his daughter as if he had just retrieved a photograph from the bottom of the water. His lips moved, but no sound came. Then, a single tear slipped down his cheek before he could wipe it away. It fell onto the back of his hand, breaking silently like a shattered excuse. Everyone in the courtroom saw it. No one whispered anymore. The silence now was not emptiness, but a space for a man to admit what he had lost. Dawson started to speak again. Judge Coleman lifted the file in front of her and closed it neatly. She looked down toward the witness stand, then turned to the back row. Detective Santos. Maria stood, fastening the button on her jacket as she stepped into the aisle. Her gaze was neither cold nor consoling. It cut straight, like a live wire connecting the event to the truth. The judge gave a single nod. "I would like to present new evidence regarding suspicious transactions connected to Miss Blank 2, Vanessa Blake." Maria stepped into the center of the courtroom, received the USB drive from the clerk, and plugged it into the computer. The screen on the wall lit up. She looked straight at the defendant's seat, her voice not loud but clear in every word. "This is your voice, Vanessa. Sign it, and the girl will disappear." The bar's noise echoed into the silent room. The clink of glasses, the rustle of papers, Vanessa's whisper, David's heavy breathing. A long pause followed. Jonathan gently placed his hand on the back of Emily's chair. The girl did not take her eyes off the screen, clutching her teddy bear tighter. Turner asked permission to submit the bank statements. Maria passed forward the color printouts, 2 transfers from Emily's mother's estate fund into the account of CW Consulting. Maria added in an even tone, "The account holder is Carla White, 28 years old, your close friend, Vanessa." A subpoena was served this morning. The courtroom doors opened. The bailiff led Carla inside. She lowered her head, avoiding Vanessa's gaze. Dawson jumped up in objection, but Judge Coleman raised her hand. "Sit down, counselor. Witness, step to the stand." Carla swallowed hard. Her voice trembled. Miss Vanessa said it was just to temporarily manage the money. She told me to open a shell company. I received the money and sent it back according to her instructions. Turner asked slowly, "What instructions?" Carla glanced briefly at Vanessa, then turned away. That night at the bar, she said once he signed, the little girl would have to move out. I didn't think it would go this far. Vanessa slammed the table, her chair screeching across the floor. "Shut up, Carla. You got your share, don't pretend otherwise." Judge Coleman struck the gavel sharply. "Defendant, keep order." Maria signaled the clerk to play the second recording. Vanessa's voice rang out again, nearly pressed against David's ear in the bar. "You just need to sign. I'll take care of the rest." David held his forehead. He trembled as if he had just come out of ice water. My God, what have I done? Another figure waited outside under subpoena. Mark Sullivan walked in, his once hardened look now subdued. He took the stand, not daring to glance in David's direction. "I was there. I heard Vanessa say it word for word. Mr. Carter was very drunk. She pushed the papers in front of him, told him to just sign and be done. I never thought about the child." Vanessa exploded. "All of you joined forces to slander me. You are just like your sister, always stealing everything from me." Her words tore through the polished veneer. The entire courtroom turned to look at her. In Vanessa's eyes there was no trace of feigned sorrow anymore, only venom and old resentment. Emily flinched and buried her face in her arm. Jonathan leaned down and whispered, "It's all right. You are safe." Dawson tried to salvage the moment. "Your Honor, the defendant's emotions cannot substitute for evidence." "As for the so-called psychological report," Turner interrupted, laying another file on the table. "That report was written by someone without a license to practice. We verified it with the State Psychology Board. The document is a forgery." Judge Coleman received the verification receipt and held Dawson in her gaze for a long beat. Then she turned to Vanessa. "Do you wish to explain the transfer orders?" Vanessa pressed her lips together, her eyes darting around for something to cling to. There was nothing. Her breath came fast, and then she burst out in broken phrases. I only wanted to make things easier for him. That girl, she always dragged him back into the past. Jonathan responded calmly, without raising his voice. "No one stole anything. You chose this path yourself." David lifted his head. For the first time, he looked directly at Vanessa. "I allowed you to do it. I bear my share of the blame." In a courtroom full of people, the scratch of the clerk's pen on paper was still audible. Linda exhaled as if she had released a handful of stones. Henry nodded slowly. Emily sat up straighter. She did not smile, but the fear in her eyes had lessened. Judge Coleman closed the file. Her voice was balanced, like scales resting evenly. "The court will recess for deliberation. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock, the verdict will be announced." The gavel struck. The sound was sharp and final. Vanessa panted, her eyes sparking with rage. Carla slumped her shoulders. Mark bowed his head. David could hardly stand, his hand gripping the edge of the table. Jonathan bent down and whispered in Emily's ear, "You were very brave today." Emily gave a small nod. She watched the judge leave the room, her heart still racing but no longer frantic. At the end of the aisle, Maria closed her notebook and gave Turner a short, firm nod. Tomorrow would be the answer. The next morning, at exactly 9 o'clock, everyone returned to the courtroom. The doors opened, and Judge Patricia Coleman took her seat on the bench. The whole room rose, then sat down again. Jonathan Reed quietly pulled out a chair for Emily, placing the teddy bear in her lap. Attorney Michael Turner organized his files. On the opposite side, Vanessa Blake sat stiffly. Peter Dawson kept his head bowed, while Carla White and Mark Sullivan remained silent, as if they had just awakened from a nightmare. The judge reviewed the final report, her voice steady and clear. After considering the testimonies, the evidence, and the independent verifications, the court concludes: the defendant Vanessa Blake is guilty of asset misappropriation and fraud. She is sentenced to prison. The accomplices, Carla White and Mark Sullivan, bear corresponding criminal and civil liabilities. Attorney Peter Dawson is disbarred for submitting falsified documents and violating professional ethics. A faint murmur spread and quickly died. Vanessa shot up to her feet, her lips moving, but no sound came out. Court officers approached. She turned to look at David, her eyes filled with both desperation and hatred, then lowered her head as she was taken away. Carla sobbed quietly. Mark could not even lift his face. David rose very slowly. He turned toward Emily. For the first time, he walked up to her without Vanessa standing between them. His voice was hoarse and trembling. "I betrayed you and your mother. I don't deserve to be called a father." Emily clutched the teddy bear. She turned her face aside, a tear slipping onto her hand. She whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "I can't forgive you yet, but I don't want to lose you again." David nodded, as if receiving his own private sentence. He spoke softly, almost like a promise to himself. "I will make it right, no matter how long it takes." Jonathan laid his hand on Emily's shoulder, firm and warm. Forgiveness doesn't come in a single day, but love can begin again, right now. Detective Maria Santos closed her notebook, giving Turner a small nod. In the back row, Mrs. Linda Green dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, while Mr. Henry placed his hand gently on his wife's shoulder. Everyone seemed to wait for the final word. Judge Coleman looked at the guardianship file and continued, "As for custody, to ensure the best interests of Emily, the court decides. Temporary guardianship will be shared between Jonathan Reed and David Carter under the supervision of the Child Protection Agency. Any third-party contact must be approved." A middle-aged woman stepped forward and gave a brief introduction. "I am Karen Liu, a social worker appointed by the court. I will monitor visitation schedules, provide psychological support for the child, and submit periodic reports." Her words were concise, her eyes gentle yet firm. The court clerk read out the visitation timetable, the date of the first therapy session, and the hotline for emergencies. Turner signed the confirmation. Jonathan requested a separate appointment for the following Monday. Karen nodded and quickly noted it in her book. When the hearing ended, everyone dispersed. David stood a short distance from Emily, not moving closer than what she could bear. He simply said, "I'll see you Thursday afternoon at Miss Karen's office. I'll be there on time." Emily did not reply, but she gave a very small nod. In the hallway, yellow lights poured down onto the stone floor. Maria paused to offer a brief congratulation. Linda embraced Emily, whispering, "You did so well." Turner shook Jonathan's hand, his voice calm but steady. "We've made it halfway." They stepped out onto the courthouse steps. The city wind swept through, carrying the smell of coffee from a street cart at the corner. Jonathan opened the car door and waited for Emily to get in. She held the door without closing it completely, then looked up at him. Her eyes were still swollen but no longer afraid. "Do you think?" Emily hesitated, her voice trembling like a newly strung violin. "I can trust Dad again?" On the courthouse steps that day, Emily asked softly. Jonathan pulled open the car door, bent down to her eye level. "Trust is not an answer that comes right away," he said slowly. "It is built through small things, repeated over time. If your father can do that, your heart will know." Months passed. Karen Liu monitored the scheduled visits consistently. Every Thursday, David came on time, sat in the counseling room, spoke little but kept his word. He quit drinking. On Karen's desk was the small silver pin David had proudly shown her after his very first group meeting, a milestone of a man trying to begin again. He asked to return to his old woodworking shop, willing to take the extra shifts, focusing on repetitive tasks so his mind would not drift away. Emily met with a child therapist, as the court had suggested. In the early sessions, she only drew pictures. Slowly, she began to talk more, mentioning her mother, the smell of vanilla ice cream, the striped yellow and green shirt, and the nights of fear after the funeral. Meanwhile, she lived with Jonathan. He held fast to the simple things, being present at dinner, leaving the night light on, never closing her bedroom door all the way. He created a foundation in Emily's mother's name to support orphans, asking Turner and Anna to handle the paperwork. Each time he spoke of the foundation, Jonathan would pause, as though remembering the one who had laid the first stone for the path he was walking now. This afternoon, They agreed to meet at Central Park. Emily wore a new white dress. Jonathan sat on their familiar bench, a cup of vanilla ice cream placed between them. He checked his watch, then looked toward the path. David appeared at the edge of the street. He stood still for a few seconds, drew a deep breath, then stepped forward. "Hello, sweetheart," he said, his voice quiet and steady. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want to be here, to watch you grow up." Emily didn't answer immediately. She scooped a spoonful of ice cream, let it melt in her mouth as if testing the sweetness. After a moment, she opened her backpack and took out her old teddy bear. Holding it with both hands, she straightened her back and looked directly into David's eyes. "Mom bought this for me," Emily said. "Now I'm giving it to you, but I will wait to see you change." David received it. He pressed the teddy bear to his chest, as though holding a responsibility. His chest rose and fell heavily. He spoke softly, not too loud, afraid to startle her, but each word carried weight. "I will bring it with me every time I come, and each time I will do exactly what I promised." Jonathan watched the two of them, a faint smile at the corner of his lips. He did not interrupt that moment. Only when Emily turned back to him did he speak. "You have two fathers now, Emily. One who, with your mother, created the memories you carry, and one who will help you create the future." Emily looked at Jonathan, then at David. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air of the park fill her chest. She stretched out her left hand to hold Jonathan's, and with her right, she reached toward David. David hesitated for a beat, then placed his rough hand into his daughter's. "I will try to trust again," Emily said, "because I think Mom would want that too." Karen stood at a distance, watching the three of them from the walkway. She wrote a short line in her notebook, then closed it. Words weren't really needed. Some images spoke for themselves. They walked slowly along the edge of the lake. Jonathan explained how to fold a paper boat. David said he still remembered the way the evening wind used to blow, and Emily nodded, suggesting that next time they should bring thicker paper so the boat wouldn't sink. The slanting light of the afternoon spread across the water, soft and shimmering. Before parting, David handed over the schedule for the next week, still Thursday afternoon. He asked Jonathan if he could help with the pickup and drop-off. Jonathan nodded. "We'll do it together," he said. David held the stuffed bear close, whispering, "Thank you." On the way to the gate, Emily suddenly ran ahead. She turned around and stretched out both hands. Jonathan and David jogged slowly after her. She grabbed each of their hands, pulling them toward the middle, laughing. Her smile wasn't entirely free of shadows, but it was bright enough to redraw the horizon. From afar, they looked like a broken cord being tied back together, not seamless yet, but growing stronger with each step. And in the middle of the park that season, a tiny girl was running between two men, holding tightly to both sides, the living symbol of a family stitched back together from the ruins. In the end, the story closed with a smile that was not yet complete, but bright enough to open a new sky. The wrongdoers had been punished by the law and by the truth itself. The good were rewarded with trust, with the chance to start over, and with a family rebuilt from ruins. Emily had two fathers, one who guarded the memories and one who built the future. It was a simple yet powerful message that when one door closes through injustice, we must do everything right to open a door of compassion. I want to ask you, which moment touched your heart the most? Which words from Emily left you choked with emotion? If you were in Jonathan's place, what would you do when you saw a child pushed out the door of her home? And if you were David, would you have the courage to admit your mistakes and walk again on the long road of redemption? As the channel's host, I truly care about your feelings. Have you been doing okay lately? Is there something that has been weighing heavily on your heart? Please share in the comments. We are here to listen to one another. If you are going through a difficult time, remember this: you are not alone. Kind hands always exist, sometimes taking the form of a stranger willing to stop his car and say, "From now on, you will walk with me." If you love heartwarming stories, moving stories like this, please follow the channel. Suggest a topic you would like to read next, or share your own story. Who knows? The next story might be your healing journey, and together we will write an ending that is fair, gentle, and filled with hope.